Well, I have a movie pass, so punch it! Solo, a Star Wars story, is a science fantasy space adventure midquel movie taking place after Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith and before Rogue One. The film tells the origins of a young Han Solo, chronicling his transformation from a love-struck, idealistic orphan on Corellia into a hardened outlaw, with many fateful meetings along the way, including Chewbacca, Lando, and the Millennium Falcon. Han's love and friendships are put to the ultimate test against uneasy allegiances and shady intentions. Who can Han trust in the seedy Wild West world of underground gangsters and in a galaxy under Imperial rule? I have a mixed, leaning towards negative opinion of this movie. I was actually, surprisingly, quite enjoying the first half. But also unexpectedly, once Lando and L3 pop up in Act 2, I was taken out of the movie and began losing interest. The grounded, sincere, and character-focused beginning devolves into a dark, shaky cam / large, noisy, over-the-top CGI fest with heavy-handed fan service, sequel baiting, and modern political nonsense. Meanwhile, the main character stories are put on hold. That is really unfortunate because it turns out the filmmakers had a great old-fashioned Western tragedy to tell, which was diluted by the origin story requirements. Solo starts off on a strange note, as the blue long time ago text isn't followed up by an exciting, abrupt cut into space. Instead, it's followed by more blue text, setting up Han's slave life on Corellia. Huh. You mean like a title crawl could've? Then we learn that the whole plot of the movie will revolve around the high asking price of refined hyperfuel. To make The Last Jedi feel better, I guess. You'll also see Han's gold dice a lot. After the blue text, we don't get a cut to space or an establishing shot of the planet Corellia, but rather we go straight to Han in the middle of Grand Theft Speedo. Look, the man is no Harrison Ford, and very few people were asking for this movie, but Alden as young Han Solo won me over, doing his own thing with the role, with a few of Harrison's familiar tics and quirks. Alden is charismatic and energetic, flashing a believable, defiant attitude towards his Corellian overlords. Emilia Clarke as Qi'ra, the equivalent of Han's high school girlfriend, brings some oomph and good chemistry. Her and Han's idealistic plans to hit the road in their top-down speeder and leave this dump in their dust are immediately endearing, harkening back to that 1950s American Graffiti teen spirit. I bought into their hormone, adrenaline-fueled romance. I'm a sucker for that stuff. Though, I wish that a little more time was spent showing at least a single day in Han's life on Corellia. The movie gave me an efficient picture of the slave life and hierarchy, but I would have liked to have felt the pressure Han and Qi'ra were under in their daily lives, to better understand what they are trying to escape from. Still, things continue on an upward trend as we are shown the lives of everyman Imperial workers in their cheery recruitment videos, revealing another side to the Empire. There are stormtroopers making casual, fun, yet jaded small talk. Some cool creature designs with classic cheesy Muppet-like voice actors. I cracked a smile at the voice actress for Proxima and at a little green Krang in a fishbowl belting out bass harmonies. If you told me that the 20% of footage that Lord and Miller directed was mostly in Act 1, then I believe you. There's also a thrilling train heist with real stakes, a gritty war zone that we cut away from too early, a rad bounty hunter type named Enfys Nest with goosebump-inducing choir music, and a lot of good situational humor. Not too irreverent or out of place, just casual and charming, such as an awkward social moment with Chewie getting a couple of drinks. Speaking of whom, Chewbacca's introduction is quite cool and brutal. I may never look at him the same way though. I really liked his and Han's friendship throughout the movie, slowly proving their trust to one another by repaying selfless acts. Also good is Woody Harrelson as Han's mentor, Beckett, who has a "what can you do for me" attitude. Beckett's sincere side is constantly at odds with his past experiences, which have taught him that the universe is a cruel, backstabbing place. And yet, Beckett sees a little of his old self in Han, genuinely moved by the young Solo. There's a pathos behind Beckett's warning lines to Han about getting into this business, hinting at his own regrets. That made me wish we got to find out his backstory. Nope! Thanks, Lando and L3! I'd have preferred spending that time with Beckett's crew, who are fresh and likable. Jon Favreau and Thandie Newton turn in fun and spunky performances, respectively. The movie's pacing was casual and slow within the scenes, lacking style, but there were some sharp and clever transitional edits between scenes, which, along with the performances, kept things moving. Particularly the cut to the villain, Dryden's introduction scene with the regional governor. Paul Bettany as Dryden was the highlight of the movie for me, and I'm thankful that Bettany was recast into the role rather than the original plan for Dryden to be a fully CGI alien. So much of Bettany's performance is in his physical presence and interactions. The way he ingratiates himself to his guests, asks how they are feeling, comforts them, but in the most sinister and powerful way. A soft touch, followed by a polite, "Tell me, why shouldn't I kill you?" There's something so sadistic about the contrast, and the subtle way his facial scars and eyes redden as he grows angry. Solo, A Star Wars Story's first act is good, in a casual Sunday movie kind of way, not a blockbuster, with its focus placed on Han, Qi'ra, and Beckett. Han being naive and idealistic, but still being quick-witted and rebellious. Qi'ra having changed since their days together on Corellia, but being swept up again by her old flame. And Beckett, who sees potential in Han, but doesn't trust anyone, including Qi'ra. Classic ideas about how time and circumstances change the people you know, and questioning whether their past selves can be reclaimed. This is a really solid, if predictable, setup. Then Act 2 happens, and the movie takes a massive detour into exactly what you would expect from a Han Solo origin movie. Sure, in Act 1 there were already some off-putting moments, like how Han gets his name and his blaster, but everything else was working for me, so I excused it. The whole second half of the movie is running through a Han origin checklist while slowing down the development between Han, Qi'ra, and Beckett. First, Donald Glover as Lando. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I didn't care for him. It's weird. I lowered my expectations for Alden as Han Solo to the degree that he grew on me easily, whereas everyone was hyping up Glover's Lando so much that I ended up underwhelmed. That, coupled with his smarminess and the screen time he's taking away from the main story, was a huge turnoff for me. Glover looks the part and nails the accent, mostly only when he's yelling. His first off-screen lines blew me away. He sounded exactly like Billy Dee Williams. But for most of his scenes, Lando is speaking in a soft voice, meant to be suave and charming, but it's less sexy and cool and more mild and dull. Glover's got the smile and the posture, but he doesn't emanate the energy. His presence and slickness should light up the production. Yet I was having way more fun with the other characters and their attitudes. Lando comes off more like a phony poser than a player. Maybe that was the point, but no one ever calls him out on it. Lando's not Han's friend, there's little time to get to know him, he's only there for transportation and to lazily sit on the ship making selfie vlogs, which reference the captain's logs from Star Trek. Star Trek? Thanks to Lando, I also now know that the word shit exists in the Star Wars universe, but it's okay because they playfully cut off the T. Look, if you're gonna put it in there, you might as well finish me off, okay? It might just be me. I went through a phase where I didn't really like Chris Pratt either, but he's grown on me. Maybe I'll warm up to Glover too. But Lando seems more like a geeky impression than a character performance. Then there's Lando's sex robot, L3. Yep. You heard me correctly. Further proof that Lando is a poser. This lady bot, while doing her best impression of man-spreading on the bridge of the Millennium Falcon, talks about how she knows that Lando likes to touch her parts. Puh, but she's not interested in him in that way. But if she were, oh, she'd find a way to make it work. The word sex isn't used, though it's all fairly obvious based on the tone of the whole scene. L3 is loud, with an antisocial, mean-spirited attitude, and has a side plot wherein she's an advocate for the robots' liberation movement. Fighting against the Organarchy, I guess. No. A character politely asks if she needs anything, and she fires back, "Equal rights." Kennedy? This line made people in my theater laugh, including the guy sitting next to me. Maybe I'm the one who's out of touch. I don't know. Regardless of whether or not you agree with the political message or not, it still feels forced and comes out of nowhere. I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of new expanded universe literature about the robots' liberation movement, but why shove it in here? Give it its own story. It sticks out like a sore thumb amidst this otherwise old-fashioned, grounded, Western tale with romantic, operatic notions and underground gangsters. In addition to Lando and L3, there is an alien card game that the audience doesn't know the rules to, so they just imply that it's poker. This is followed by relentless action. The crew's one last big job takes place in tiny caves and corridors with flickering murky lighting that is poorly suited for modern dim digital projection. Couple that with copious, shaky camera work. Everything started to really drag for me, despite things supposedly heating up. There's a race against the clock aspect to the events of Act 2, but the filmmakers forgot something important. The clock. Knowing how little time they have left to get things done would have increased the tension. Also, geography. Give the audience a layout of the plan on a map, explaining the distances that need to be traveled between planets and within the base. Context! Pass it on. The third act is an improvement, but I wish that a lot of its twists and developments weren't so tightly packed here, but instead had been bumped to Act 2, allowing time for the consequences to be explored and affect the characters. Act 2 does have 3 scenes on the Falcon dedicated to the main story, but it also drops the ball in terms of the characters committing to or dismissing one another during all the ruckus. Everything pauses until all of the action is done, and there's a lot of action. Han Solo's final development is rushed, not creating a convincing, smooth transition into his indifferent outlaw self. I'm an outlaw. No, you're the good guy. That dialogue. Ugh. Solo: A Star Wars Story's ending is a great idea, but the story lost focus on building up to it in Act 2. Han and Beckett's relationship should be the most important in the film. Han needs time to admire Beckett and bond with him like a surrogate father figure for the point of the movie to be effective. During Act 2, Beckett disappears into the background, showing up towards the end of long scenes, so you're like, oh yeah, he's still in this. It's very cold and detached. Beckett really needed to be integrated into the scenes with Chewie and Han, making them sort of a buddy trio. Maybe add a montage of jobs that they're pulling together, indicating a passage of time. Han only knows Beckett for like a week, and doesn't have the time to develop a meaningful mentor relationship with him. What should be the emotional, heart-ripping core of this movie is just an, oh, I see what you were going for. That's kind of clever. There's also a mentor versus lover aspect that is underplayed between Beckett and Qi'ra, both wanting what's best for Han. I wish that Beckett had a scene on the Millennium Falcon confronting Qi'ra like, I know who you are and you best stay away from my boy. He's a good kid. Qi'ra would throw it back in his face like, I know who you are and you best watch yourself. And tension would be created between the two for the big job. And the audience could then be teased like, oh, Kira's going to blow Beckett's cover intentionally and betray him. Or vice versa. You know, some dicey fun with allegiances. You could be developing these characters and add a new layer of suspense and interest during all the action. Instead, we get Han Solo's greatest hits playlist meets Pirates of the Caribbean in space, complete with the Space Kraken. Sounds exciting, and for many it will be, but I was preferring the more down-to-earth Western gunslinger aspect of the first half. To top it all off, the film hedges its bets with a non-committal ending. I guess you'll have to see Solo 2 to find out how he really became an outlaw. Heck, maybe even Solo 3. We may have a trilogy on our hands, because there is a lot of direct sequel advertisement going on here. Hey kid, if you're ever on Tatooine, I heard about a job. Big time gangster, Jabba the Hutt. It reminded me of the Strider reference to Legolas at the end of the Battle of the Five Armies. Lucasfilm is really starting to play up the interconnectivity of the Star Wars cinematic universe now. If you're enjoying the movie, then I'm sure you'll be fine with it. I love Batman Begins, so its Joker baiting was exciting for me. On the other hand, Solo is sequel baiting before its own climax. And at a certain point, there is a massive reveal for future movies. And I'm just left wondering, why am I not watching that right now instead of Solo? Why tease me for something that may never pay off? On the day that Solo was released, they announced a Boba Fett movie. I highly doubt that this was a tease for that one, which means that this won't pay off for like 4 or 5 years. Side note, if you didn't like Kylo Ren removing his mask in The Force Awakens, just wait until Enfys Nest's identity is revealed in this movie. They could have at least cast someone physically believable in the role. The person looks like a teenager with big sad eyes and pouty lips, about to cry. The face communicating, please don't be mad at me. No way was this person doing all that cool stuff earlier. Overall, I'm impressed with Ron Howard. The man came in, reshot 80% of the movie, refused to waver from the original release date, and it turned out fine. My problems mostly lie with the story he had to shoot. And I'll always wonder what Lord and Miller's version would have been like. What parts of this movie were directed by them? Did Solo, a Star Wars story, need to exist? Probably not. Does it prove itself anyway? Almost. It convinced me of its own promise. This could have been a beautiful, old-fashioned Western tragedy about how an idealistic kid, similar to Luke, is corrupted by his environment and becomes jaded to his own naive hope. The way that Han's eyes gaze off in a sad, dreamlike state as he's cruising the mean streets of Corellia. There was great potential here. I enjoyed half of it, but it ultimately succumbs to what you'd expect from a Han Solo origin movie. I rate Solo, a Star Wars story, 2.5 out of 5 stars. The movie may be worth you checking out because the first half was enjoyable and most normal people really seem to like Lando. You might love it. The lowered expectations seem to be working in the film's favor for a lot of audience members, and that was almost the case for me, too. Take care. The film tells the origins of a young... Who can Han trust in this seedy, Wild West world of underground? Who can Han trust? Character-focused beginning devolves into a dark, shaky cam / old-fashioned Western tragedy. Takes place. I'm farting with my lips when I say place. You mean like a title crawl could have done? The whole plot of the film will revolve around. Then we learn that the whole plot of the film will revolve around. How can you can't say that? But I would have liked. But I would have. Back to the recording. Right. Krang in a fishbowl. Then I believe you. There's also a thrilling hand ignore that. There were. I lowered my expectations for Alden as Han Solo to the degree. Frick. Land off. He's land off the yellow. Land off.